Introduction. Join us on a journey of courage and conversation while we join together here and actively take a part in camping out cancer. A crusade to spark vital dialogue about men's health, one campfire story at a time. It is here we'll show that a diagnosis is not a destination. It's a challenge to be met with a prostate attitude, one of strength, resilience, and unwavering spirit. It is in the intimate settings of our campfire cancer survivor stories that these important conversations will take place and resonate. Together, we can spread awareness, encourage early detection, and build a community where every man feels empowered to talk about his health. Let's make sure no man faces this alone. Hashtag prostate attitude. Hashtag camping out cancer. Hashtag men's health. Hashtag prostate cancer awareness. Season 1, Episode 1. A Carpenter's Hands and a Cracking Foundation. In our first campfire story, we find Mark, a man who built his life with his own two hands, only to discover that the foundation of his own body was cracking. The call came on a Tuesday, not with a bang, but with a whisper. For 40 years, Mark's hands had built things. They had hammered, planned, and sanded. They had laid foundations for houses and carefully crafted rocking chairs for his grandchildren. They were strong, calloused, and dependable. He was a builder, and he had always been in control. His body, he thought, was the ultimate project, a sturdy frame, well-maintained, built to last. A yearly checkup was just another inspection, a formality to ensure the integrity of the structure. Then the whisper. The PSA levels were elevated, the doctor's voice said, a polite clinical hum on the other end of the line. The follow-up test had confirmed it, prostate cancer. The words hung in the air, cold and sterile, like a foreign language he couldn't understand. Mark's hands, which had built a life, felt suddenly empty. His body, once a fortress, felt like a house with a cracked foundation. He hung up the phone and walked out of his workshop, the smell of sawdust and old wood no longer comforting, but haunting. He picked up a block of oak, his fingers tracing the smooth grain the way he would a grandchild's cheek. He felt the tremor in his hand, a betrayal. How could this be? He'd eaten right, stayed active, never complained. He was the fix-it man, the one everyone came to when something was broken. But this was a problem he couldn't fix. He couldn't just sand it away or nail a new board over it, the fault line. For the next 2 weeks, Mark retreated into a silence deeper than the quiet of his workshop. He was living in the same house with his wife, Sarah, but he was alone. The conversations that once flowed so easily about her day, about the kids, and about having what to have for dinner, now felt like mountains that he couldn't climb. He saw the worry in her eyes, the way that she would start to ask a question and then stop herself. He couldn't bring himself to talk about it. It felt like admitting defeat, a weakness he had never allowed himself to show. He was an Army veteran, a man who had faced down fears far greater than this, but this fear was different. It wasn't an enemy he could see. It was a saboteur within, a traitor to the very body he had built. One evening, as he sat down in his warm armchair, the house silent around him, Sarah sat on the floor and took his calloused hand in her own. Her touch was gentle, but her voice was firm. "Mark," she said, her eyes meeting his, "you're trying to camp out on this mountain by yourself, but you don't have to. We're a team, remember?" Her words were a lifeline. They cracked the concrete wall he had built around his heart. The very act of seeing his struggle without him having to say a word was more powerful than any tool he had ever used. That night, she showed him a website, a local support group. He balked first. "I don't need to talk about it with a bunch of strangers," he grumbled. "It's not strangers," she said softly. "It's a campfire." The next week he went, and he sat in a circle with 5 other men. They were different ages from walks of life, but they all carried the same weight, the same tremor in their hands. They spoke not of their illnesses, but of their lives, their kids, their passions, their fears. They shared their campfire cancer survivor stories. A retired teacher talked about his grandchildren. A young father spoke of his fear of not seeing his daughter grow up. And then a man named Jim, with a kind face and a calm voice, told his story. He spoke of the shock and the anger, the feeling of betrayal. He spoke of the day that he realized he couldn't fight this alone. He said his prostate attitude wasn't about being a superhero, but it was about the courage to ask for help, to let his loved ones in, to see his body not as a cracked foundation, but as a project still very much under construction. As Jim spoke, Mark felt a dam break inside of him. He saw his own story reflected in this man's words. He realized that this was the real conversation that took place, where the plans were made and where the direction became clear. In that circle. In that circle, he understood that vulnerability was not weakness, but a tool to connect, to build, to find strength in others. He went home that night, and for the first time in weeks, he truly looked at his wife. He took her hands in his, and this time, there was no tremor. He looked into her eyes, and he finally spoke. He talked about the call, about the fear, about the feeling, like a broken machine. As he spoke, he felt a profound sense of relief, of a weight being lifted. The conversation had started. The foundation wasn't fixed, not yet, but it was no longer cracked. It was being rebuilt, stronger than before, with the help of a partner. He still had a long road ahead, the treatments, the uncertainties, but as he looked out the window at the stars, he knew he wasn't camping out on this mountain alone anymore. He had his wife, he had his family, and a new community of men who understood. He had a new perspective. His hands were still a builder's hands, and he was ready to get back to work.